The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the country club's mahogany-paneled walls as I watched my wife of 18 years prepare to humiliate herself. Again. Danielle stood at the center of our social circle, her designer dress clinging to curves she'd paid good money to maintain, champagne flute raised high like some twisted trophy. Her blonde highlights caught the light as she swayed slightly, 3 glasses deep into what I knew would be another embarrassing performance. "Listen up, everyone," she called out, her voice carrying that particular pitch it got when she'd had too much to drink and too little attention. The conversations around us died down as faces turned toward her expectant smile. I leaned against the bar, nursing my whiskey, watching the scene unfold with the detached fascination of someone observing a car accident in slow motion. After 23 years in commercial lease negotiations, I'd learned to read people, to spot the tells that revealed their true intentions. Tonight, Danielle was broadcasting hers like a neon sign. "I want to make a toast," she continued, her eyes scanning the crowd of perfectly coiffed suburbanites who made up our social circle. "To new beginnings, to second chances, and to finally having the courage to admit when something isn't working anymore." Sabrina Lane, Danielle's best friend and business partner, raised her own glass with an encouraging smile. Her husband Gregory stood beside her, his handsome face wearing that practiced expression of polite interest that had made him millions in real estate development. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm celebrating my own divorce," Danielle announced with a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "To finally being free to live my life the way I want to." The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs, but her inner circle, Sabrina, Melissa Chan with her ever-present phone ready to document everything for her social media empire, and Oliver Burke, the smarmy lawyer who'd been sniffing around Danielle like a dog in heat. They all raised their glasses and cheered. "You go, girl!" Melissa shouted, already angling for the perfect shot. "Live your truth!" "About time you put yourself first," Oliver added, moving closer to Danielle with the predatory grace of a man who thought he was about to get lucky. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, savoring the burn as I watched Gregory's reaction. His smile was just a fraction too wide, his laugh a beat too late. Amateur. In my line of work, I'd seen better acting from desperate tenants trying to negotiate out of a lease violation. The crowd was still buzzing with excitement, everyone eager to be part of the drama, when I pushed off from the bar and walked over to Sabrina. She was beaming at her best friend, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband had been screwing said best friend for the past 4 months. "Sabrina," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the celebratory noise like a blade through silk. She turned to me with that patronizing smile wives give to husbands they think are about to embarrass them. "Victor, isn't this exciting? Danielle is finally—" "Why are you laughing?" I interrupted, my voice calm and conversational. "She'll be back with your husband before the night ends." The effect was immediate and devastating. Sabrina's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips, her smile cracking like thin ice. The color drained from her face as my words sank in, and I watched her eyes dart instinctively to Gregory, whose own expression had shifted from smug satisfaction to barely concealed panic. The silence spread outward like ripples on a pond. Melissa's phone, which had been capturing every moment, suddenly felt heavy in her hands. Oliver's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Even Danielle, who'd been basking in the attention, seemed to realize that something had gone terribly wrong. "What did you just say?" Sabrina whispered, her voice barely audible over the classical music that continued playing from the club's sound system, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the dance floor. I didn't repeat myself. I didn't need to. The truth has a way of echoing in the spaces between words, filling silence with understanding. Instead, I finished my whiskey in one smooth motion, set the glass down on a nearby table, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear the beginning of what would become the most spectacular social implosion our little suburb had seen in years. Sabrina's voice, rising in pitch and volume as she turned on her husband. Gregory's stammered denials. Danielle's desperate attempts to regain control of a narrative that was spiraling away from her like a runaway train. But I was already gone, stepping out into the cool October night with the satisfaction of a man who just lit a very long fuse. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, a text from Janice Harper, my office manager, and the closest thing I had to a friend in this whole mess. "How'd it go, boss?" I typed back quickly. "Better than expected. The fireworks are just getting started." As I drove home through the quiet streets of our affluent neighborhood, past houses that looked like something from a magazine spread, I allowed myself a small smile. The evening had gone exactly as I'd planned, but it was only the beginning. After all, I'd had 4 months to prepare for this moment. 4 months since I'd discovered the truth about my wife's late-night planning sessions and client dinners that always seemed to coincide with Gregory's business trips. 4 months to gather evidence, to plan my strategy, and to prepare for the war that Danielle had started the moment she decided that 18 years of marriage was worth less than the thrill of sneaking around with her best friend's husband. She wanted a divorce? She was going to get one, just not the kind she was expecting. The house felt different when I walked through the front door that night. Not physically. Danielle's interior designer had made sure every surface gleamed with that particular kind of expensive perfection that screamed successful suburban couple. But the emotional landscape had shifted, like the moment after an earthquake when everything looks the same, but the foundation has cracked. I poured myself another whiskey and settled into my home office, a space Danielle rarely entered because it didn't photograph well for her social media posts. Too many filing cabinets, too much actual work, not enough aesthetic appeal for her carefully curated online presence. My laptop hummed to life, and I opened the folder I'd been building for months. Project Danielle, I'd named it with the same methodical approach I used for complex commercial deals. Every piece of evidence was cataloged, cross-referenced, and verified. Old habits from my blue-collar upbringing. My father had been a union electrician who taught me that the devil lived in the details, and if you didn't document everything, you'd get screwed when it mattered most. The timeline was damning in its precision. March 15th. First suspicious credit card charge at Romano's, the upscale Italian place downtown. Dinner for two, $347 charged at 9:30 p.m. on a night when Danielle claimed to be at a vendor meeting, and Gregory was supposedly in Hartford on business. I'd called the hotel he was meant to be staying at. No reservation under his name. March 22nd. Hotel charge at the Meridian downtown. $289 for a junior suite. Checked in at 2:15 p.m., checked out at 6:45 p.m. Danielle's calendar showed a site visit for a client event. The client, when I'd casually asked at a barbecue, had never heard of any such meeting. April 3rd. Another Romano's charge, this time $298. I'd driven by that night after my poker game with the guys. Spotted Gregory's silver Porsche in the valet section, right next to Danielle's white BMW. The pattern continued through April and May, becoming bolder and more frequent. They were getting sloppy, drunk on the thrill of their secret romance, and confident that the loyal, dependable husband would never catch on. They'd underestimated me. It was a mistake people often made, confusing quiet competence with weakness, assuming that because I didn't need to be the loudest voice in the room, I wasn't paying attention. My phone rang, interrupting my review of the evidence. Danielle's name flashed on the screen, and I could hear party noise in the background when I answered. "Victor, where the hell did you go?" Her voice was sharp with anger and alcohol. "You just left me here to deal with what, exactly?" I kept my voice neutral, professional. The same tone I used when a tenant was trying to bullshit their way out of a lease violation. "Sabrina's having some kind of breakdown. She's screaming at Greg about something and everyone's staring, and I look like an idiot because my husband just disappeared." "Your soon-to-be ex-husband," I corrected gently. "Remember?" You were celebrating. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke again, her voice smaller, uncertain in a way I hadn't heard in years. Victor, what did you say to her? The truth, I replied. Something you might want to try sometime. I hung up before she could respond and turned back to my laptop. The next phase of my plan required precision timing and careful execution. By morning, I needed to have everything in place. I opened a new email and began typing. Dear Mrs. Lane, I believe there are some things about your husband's recent business activities that you should know. Please find attached a comprehensive timeline with supporting documentation. I think you'll find it illuminating. A concerned friend. The attachments included everything: credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even the photos Mrs. Lipman had taken from her kitchen window when she'd spotted Gregory's car in our driveway on a Tuesday afternoon when I was supposed to be in Boston for a client meeting. The old woman missed nothing and forgot less, a valuable trait in a neighborhood where secrets were the primary currency. I'd also included screenshots of text messages from Danielle's iPad, which she'd left unlocked on the kitchen counter one morning while she rushed to get ready for a client breakfast. The messages painted a picture of two people who thought they were clever enough to conduct an affair under everyone's noses. Hope Sabrina doesn't suspect anything. She's too busy with her book club to notice. Besides, she thinks you're just helping with the Peterson event. God, I feel terrible lying to her. Don't think about it. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Besides, this is about us now. When are you going to tell Victor? Soon, after the Hendricks anniversary party. I want to wait until the social season is over. No point in ruining everyone's fun. The casual cruelty of that last message had been what finally pushed me over the edge. 18 years of marriage reduced to a scheduling consideration, something to be managed around party invitations and social obligations. I attached the file to the email and hovered my cursor over the send button. Once I clicked it, there would be no going back. Sabrina would know the truth by morning, and the carefully constructed world that Danielle and Gregory had built around their affair would come crashing down. My phone buzzed with another text from Danielle. Coming home now, we need to talk. I clicked send and closed the laptop. Let them talk. By tomorrow, they'd have much bigger problems to worry about than managing my feelings. The front door slammed 20 minutes later, followed by the sharp staccato of Danielle's heels on the hardwood floor. She appeared in my office doorway still wearing her party dress, but her makeup was smeared and her hair disheveled. The confident woman who'd toasted her own divorce was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely frightened. The party's over, she announced, as if I couldn't have guessed. Sabrina and Greg got into a screaming match in front of everyone. She accused him of cheating, and he stormed out. It was mortifying. Sounds like quite a scene, I replied, not looking up from the papers on my desk. Must have been awkward for you. She stepped into the room, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. Victor, I know things have been difficult between us lately, but what you said to Sabrina tonight was the truth, I finished. Something I'm sure you'll appreciate, given your new commitment to honesty and living authentically. I don't know what you think you know, but I finally looked up at her, and whatever she saw in my expression made her take a step back. Danielle, stop. Just stop. We both know exactly what this is about. The only question now is how ugly you want to make it. For a moment, she looked like she might try to continue the charade, to maintain the lie even in the face of obvious discovery. Then her shoulders sagged, and she sank into the chair across from my desk, like a deflating balloon. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough, I replied. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to prepare. Long enough to make sure that when you decided to blow up our marriage, I'd be ready for the fallout. She stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. What are you going to do? I smiled then, the same smile I used when closing a particularly satisfying deal. I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for tonight, Danielle. your freedom. I just hope you're prepared for what it's going to cost." The next morning brought the kind of crisp October sunshine that made our neighborhood look like a postcard, all golden leaves and perfectly manicured lawns. I was drinking coffee on the back patio when my phone started buzzing with the first wave of what would become a tsunami of social media chaos. Melissa Chan, never one to miss an opportunity for drama, had posted a series of cryptic messages on her Instagram story that were about as subtle as a brick through a window. When you find out your friend group has been lying, some people really think they can play games and not get caught. The tea is scalding this morning. Each post had hundreds of likes and dozens of comments from our social circle, all desperate to know what had happened after they'd left the party. Melissa was eating up the attention, dropping hints and responding to comments with just enough information to keep people guessing. My phone rang. Detective Eddie Doyle, my drinking buddy from the local precinct, and one of the few people in town who knew me well enough to see through the quiet exterior to the calculating mind underneath. "Jesus Christ, Victor," he said without preamble. "What the hell did you do last night? My wife's been on the phone for an hour with the other police wives, and apparently your neighborhood's about to implode." "Just told the truth," I replied, watching a squirrel navigate the oak tree in our backyard with the same careful precision I'd used to plan last night's revelation. Sometimes that's all it takes. The truth about what? Sarah's getting bits and pieces from the gossip chain, but nobody seems to know the whole story. I filled him in on the basics: Danielle's affair, my discovery, and the bomb I'd dropped at the party. Eddie listened without interruption, the way cops do when they're gathering information. "So what's your next move?" he asked when I finished. "Depends on how they play it," I said. "But I've got a feeling they're going to make this a lot easier for me than it needs to be." I was right. By 10 a.m., Sabrina had apparently received and read my email because my phone exploded with a series of increasingly frantic calls from Danielle. "Victor, you have to call Sabrina," she said when I finally answered the fifth call. "She's completely lost it. She's saying terrible things about me, about us. She won't listen to reason." "What kind of terrible things?" I asked, though I could guess. "She's telling everyone that I'm a homewrecker, that I seduced Greg, that I'm some kind of manipulative snake who destroyed her marriage. She's posting things on Facebook, Victor. Our friends are seeing this." "Are they true? The things she's saying?" The pause that followed was answer enough. "It's not that simple," Danielle finally said. "You don't understand the whole situation." "Then explain it to me. Help me understand how you accidentally ended up in hotel rooms with your best friend's husband for the past 4 months. Another pause. "I want a lawyer." "Good idea," I agreed. "You're going to need one." I hung up and immediately called my own attorney, Patricia Vance, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when the situation called for it. "Victor," she said when her secretary put me through, "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Word travels fast in our circles." "I need to move quickly, Patricia. File the papers today if possible. I want to get ahead of whatever narrative they're going to try to spin." "Already drafted," she replied with the efficiency I'd come to expect from her. "I took the liberty of preparing everything after our conversation last month. Based on the evidence you provided, we should be able to secure the house and a favorable settlement, especially given the misuse of joint funds for the affair." "How favorable?" "Let's just say that your wife's event planning business is about to become significantly less profitable, particularly if her client base finds out about her extracurricular activities." The beauty of Danielle's situation was that her business depended entirely on reputation and social connections. She planned events for the same wealthy suburban crowd that was currently dissecting her personal life on social media. Women who prided themselves on family values and traditional morality weren't going to want their anniversary parties and charity galas organized by someone who'd been caught cheating with her best friend's husband. By noon, the fallout was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. Mrs. Lipman called to inform me that she'd seen Gregory loading suitcases into his car while Sabrina screamed at him from their front porch. Oliver Burke had posted a passive-aggressive message about supporting friends through difficult transitions that fooled no one. Even the country club's event coordinator had called Danielle to discuss the Peterson anniversary party she was supposed to be planning. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when Janice knocked on my door. "Boss, you've got visitors," she said with the particular tone she used when she was trying not to laugh. "Your wife and her friend." Through my office's glass wall, I could see Danielle and Oliver in the reception area. She looked like she'd been crying, her usual perfect composure replaced by the haggard appearance of someone who'd spent the morning dealing with the consequences of her choices. Oliver, meanwhile, was trying to project confidence, but kept fidgeting with his tie, a nervous tell that made him a terrible poker player and an even worse negotiator. "Send them in," I said. They entered my office like they were walking into enemy territory, which I supposed they were. Danielle took the chair across from my desk, while Oliver remained standing, probably thinking it would give him some kind of psychological advantage. "Victor," Danielle began, her voice carefully controlled, "we need to discuss how we're going to handle this situation." "Which situation would that be?" I asked pleasantly. "Your affair, your public humiliation, or your impending divorce?" Oliver stepped forward, trying to insert himself into the conversation with the aggressive confidence of a man who'd watched too many legal dramas. "Mr. Sloan, I think we can resolve this matter amicably if we approach it rationally. Emotions are running high, but there's no need for anyone to get hurt unnecessarily." I looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to Danielle. "Is this your lawyer?" "Oliver's been helping me understand my options," she said defensively. "Your options?" I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make them both flinch. "Danielle, let me explain your options. You can sign the papers my attorney is filing today and accept the settlement she's prepared, or you can fight it and watch your reputation get dragged through every courtroom and gossip column in the state." "You can't just destroy my life because you're angry," she shot back, some of her old fire returning. "I have rights. I have a business." "Had," I corrected. "Past tense. How many clients have called to cancel since this morning?" The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. Oliver cleared his throat. "Mr. Sloan, I think you're underestimating the potential consequences of your actions. If you continue down this path, you might find yourself facing some serious allegations." "What kind of allegations?" I asked, genuinely curious about what they thought they could pin on me. "Harassment, stalking, intentional infliction of emotional distress?" he rattled off like he was reading from a textbook. "Sabrina Lane is beside herself. She's talking about filing restraining orders, pursuing damages for the destruction of her marriage." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a digital recorder, setting it on the desk between us. "Are you threatening me, Oliver?" "I'm simply pointing out that your behavior could be construed as, because if you're threatening me, I want to make sure I have it on record, for when my attorney files a countersuit for attempted extortion." The color drained from Oliver's face. "That's not... I wasn't threatening anything." "Good," I said, clicking off the recorder. "Because that would be a very stupid thing to do. Almost as stupid as thinking you could blackmail me into accepting blame for a situation you helped create." Danielle leaned forward in her chair. "Victor, please, can't we work this out privately, away from all the lawyers and the drama? You made it public the moment you decided to celebrate our divorce at a party," I replied. "You wanted everyone to know you were leaving me. Now they know why." "That's not fair. You don't understand what it's been like being married to someone who what?" I interrupted. "Who worked 60-hour weeks to pay for your business? Who never questioned your expenses or your schedule? Who trusted you completely for 18 years? She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did Oliver. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to sign the papers. You're going to take the settlement. And you're going to rebuild your life somewhere else, because your reputation in this town is finished. You can't force me to leave, Danielle said, but her voice lacked conviction. I don't have to force you, I replied. Your former friends are going to do that for me. How many invitations have you received this week? How many clients want to work with someone who destroys marriages for fun? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Oliver's nervous breathing and the distant hum of traffic outside my office window. Finally, Danielle stood up. You're not the man I married, she said. No, I agreed. I'm not. That man was naive enough to trust you. This one knows better. They left without another word, and I turned back to my computer. There was still work to do, but the hardest part was over. The truth was out, the battle lines were drawn, and Danielle was finally beginning to understand that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. Heard there was some excitement at your office. Everything okay? I typed back, just a friendly business meeting, nothing I couldn't handle. Outside my window, the October afternoon was beginning to fade into evening. In a few hours, I'd drive home to a house that felt more like mine than it had in months. Tomorrow, I'd wake up as a single man for the first time in 18 years. It was going to be a good day. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers were signed, sealed, and filed with the court. Danielle had moved in with her sister in Hartford, her event planning business reduced to a handful of corporate clients who cared more about competence than gossip. Gregory was living in a furnished apartment downtown, his marriage to Sabrina over, and his real estate partnership strained by the scandal. I should have been satisfied. The revenge had been swift, decisive, and completely legal. But as I sat in my empty house on a Friday evening, surrounded by the detritus of an 18-year marriage, I realized there was one last piece of business to attend to. The Hendricks anniversary party, the same event Danielle had mentioned in her texts. The one she'd wanted to wait until after before destroying our marriage. It was tomorrow night at the country club, and despite everything that had happened, I'd decided to attend. Not because I enjoyed social gatherings, I'd never been much for small talk and forced smiles, but because I wanted to see how our former friends would react to the new reality, to watch them navigate the awkward social dynamics of choosing sides in a suburban scandal. Most importantly, I wanted to see Danielle's face when she realized that while she'd lost everything, I'd emerged from the wreckage stronger than before. The party was in full swing when I arrived Saturday evening. The country club's ballroom had been transformed into an elegant celebration of 30 years of marriage, complete with string quartet, ice sculptures, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. The guest list was a who's who of our social circle, all dressed in their finest and pretending that the past month hadn't happened. I'd barely made it through the receiving line when Melissa Chan materialized at my elbow, her phone already recording. "Victor!" she gushed with the fake enthusiasm of someone who smelled content for her social media empire. "I'm so surprised to see you here. How are you holding up?" "Just fine, Melissa," I replied, accepting a whiskey from a passing waiter. "How's the gossip business treating you?" Her smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course not," I said, moving past her toward the bar. The crowd parted slightly as I walked, conversations fading and resuming in my wake like ripples on a pond. I'd expected the attention, the whispered speculation about why I'd come and what I might do. What I hadn't expected was the grudging respect I saw in some faces, the acknowledgement that I'd handled an impossible situation with more grace than most men would have managed. "Victor?" The voice belonged to James Hendricks himself, the guest of honor, approaching with his wife Margaret at his side. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, raising my glass. 30 years is quite an achievement. "Yes, well," Margaret said with the particular tone wealthy women used when discussing unpleasant topics. "We've certainly learned the importance of commitment." It was a pointed comment, clearly directed at the absent Danielle, and I appreciated the solidarity even if I didn't need it. Some people understand the value of keeping their word, I agreed. Others learn the cost of breaking it. We chatted for a few more minutes about safe topics, business, the weather, the upcoming election, before they moved on to greet other guests. I found myself alone at the bar, surveying the crowd and noting the various factions that had emerged in the aftermath of the scandal. There were Danielle's former supporters, women like Melissa who'd initially rallied around her narrative of liberation and self-discovery, but had quickly distanced themselves when the truth came out. There were the neutrals, people who wanted to avoid taking sides in what they saw as a private matter. And there were my unexpected allies, couples who'd been quietly appalled by Danielle's behavior and respected the way I'd handled the situation. Victor Sloan. I turned to find Gregory Lane approaching, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in the past month. His usual confident swagger was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders and darting eyes of someone who knew he was universally despised but couldn't quite bring himself to leave. "Gregory," I replied neutrally. "I'm surprised to see you here." "Couldn't miss the Hendricks party," he said with forced casualness. "Been coming for years. How's the apartment treating you?" His jaw tightened. "Fine. Just temporary, of course. Until things settle down." "Of course," I agreed. "Though I hear Sabrina's attorney is quite thorough. Might take a while to settle." He took a large gulp of his drink, liquid courage for whatever he'd come to say. "Look, Victor, I know things got out of hand, but we're both grown men here. Maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones." I stared at him for a long moment, wondering if he was really stupid enough to think we could shake hands and move on like old friends. Bygones? What I mean is, we both lost our marriages. We both paid a price. Maybe we should focus on moving forward instead of dwelling on the past. "Gregory," I said quietly, leaning closer so only he could hear. "Let me explain something to you. You didn't lose your marriage. You threw it away for a few months of sneaking around with my wife. There's a difference. Come on, man. It wasn't like that. Things just happened." "Things happened?" I repeated. "You mean like the hotel rooms? The restaurant dates? The text messages about how stupid your wife was for trusting you?" His face went pale. How did I know? Because unlike you, I'm not an idiot. I pay attention. I document everything. And when someone tries to destroy my life, I make sure they understand the consequences. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about all of it. But what's done is done. Can't we just— "No," I interrupted. "We can't. You want to know the difference between us, Gregory? You're here because you're too proud to admit you don't belong anymore. I'm here because I earned the right to be." He opened his mouth to respond, but whatever he saw in my expression made him think better of it. He drained his drink and walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd like the coward he'd always been. I was finishing my own drink when I noticed a commotion near the entrance. Heads were turning, conversations stopping, the kind of sudden attention that meant someone unexpected had arrived. Danielle stood in the doorway wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked beautiful, poised, and completely out of place, like an actress who'd wandered onto the wrong stage but was determined to finish her performance. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before conversations slowly resumed, though every eye in the room remained fixed on her. She moved through the crowd with forced confidence, her chin raised in defiance of the whispered comments and pointed stares. She made it halfway across the room before Margaret Hendricks intercepted her with the kind of smile that could cut glass. "Danielle," she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "How unexpected." "Margaret," Danielle replied, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. "Congratulations on 30 years. You and James are an inspiration." "Yes, well, we've always believed in honoring our commitments," Margaret replied with the surgical precision of a woman who'd spent decades perfecting the art of the social cut. It's so important to maintain one's integrity, don't you think? The crowd around them had gone completely silent. Danielle's composure cracked slightly, her smile becoming brittle. Of course, she managed. Integrity is everything. I'm glad you agree, Margaret continued, which is why I'm sure you'll understand that we can't have you here tonight. This is a celebration of marriage, of commitment, of the values that hold our community together. I think it would be best if you left. The words hit Danielle like a physical blow. Her face went white, then red, then white again, as she realized that she'd been publicly banished from the social circle she'd spent years cultivating. You can't be serious, she whispered. I'm completely serious, Margaret replied. Security will escort you out if necessary, but I'd prefer to handle this quietly. For everyone's sake. Danielle's eyes swept the crowd, looking for support, for someone willing to defend her. She found nothing but turned backs and averted gazes. Even Melissa had stopped recording, apparently deciding that this level of humiliation was too much, even for her social media empire. Finally, her gaze found mine across the room. For a moment, we stared at each other across the space that had once been filled with 18 years of shared history. I saw desperation in her eyes, a silent plea for help, for mercy, for some acknowledgement of what we'd once meant to each other. I raised my glass in a small salute and turned away. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed through the silent ballroom as she walked back toward the entrance, her head held high despite the complete destruction of her social standing. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow seemed louder than a gunshot. Conversations resumed slowly, cautiously, like the first tentative movements after an earthquake. I finished my drink and set the empty glass on the bar, satisfied that justice had been served in the most fitting way possible. That was brutal, a voice said beside me. I turned to find Eddie Doyle, off duty and dressed in his best suit, shaking his head in amazement. That was necessary, I corrected. Jesus, Victor. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Just remember the lesson, I said, straightening my tie. Actions have consequences. Always. I stayed for another hour, long enough to congratulate the Hendricks properly and make polite conversation with people who now saw me as someone to be respected, rather than pitied. Then I drove home through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, past houses where families were settling in for the evening, secure in their routines and their relationships. My house was dark and empty when I arrived, but it felt like home in a way it hadn't for months. I poured myself one last whiskey and stepped onto the back patio, looking up at the clear October sky. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Danielle, probably using a friend's phone since I'd blocked her regular number. I hope you're satisfied, the message read. You've destroyed everything. I typed back, slowly, carefully. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. Then I blocked that number too and deleted the conversation. The next morning, I woke up to find a for sale sign on Gregory's front lawn and a moving truck in Danielle's sister's driveway. Word traveled fast in our little suburb, and apparently, they'd both decided that staying in town wasn't an option anymore. I made coffee and read the newspaper on my patio, enjoying the peaceful silence of a Saturday morning without drama, without lies, without the constant tension of a marriage that had been fading for years. At 10 o'clock, Mrs. Lipman called to inform me that she'd seen Danielle loading boxes into a U-Haul truck. Moving to Florida, from what I heard, she said, with the satisfaction of someone who'd witnessed the conclusion of a particularly satisfying story. Her sister's got family down there. Good for her, I said, and meant it. Everyone deserves a fresh start. What about you, dear? Any plans for your fresh start? I looked around at my quiet house, at the neighborhood I'd called home for nearly 2 decades, at the life I was finally free to live on my own terms. I'm already living it, I said. That afternoon, I drove to the country club and resigned my membership. Not because I felt guilty or ashamed, but because I no longer needed what it represented. The social climbing, the careful networking, the exhausting performance of suburban success, it had all been for Danielle's benefit, part of the life she'd wanted us to build together. Now I was free to build something else, something that belonged entirely to me. I spent Sunday cleaning out closets and packing up the remnants of my marriage, donating Danielle's abandoned belongings to charity and boxing up photos that no longer held any meaning. By evening, the house felt lighter, cleaner, ready for whatever came next. Monday morning brought a call from Patricia Vance with the final settlement details. Danielle had signed everything without contest, apparently eager to close this chapter of her life and move on. The house was mine, along with most of our joint assets and investments. Her event planning business, what was left of it, would remain in Hartford until she could arrange to sell it. She's also agreed to a non-disclosure clause, Patricia added. No tell-all interviews, no social media campaigns, no attempts to rehabilitate her reputation at your expense. Smart, I said. She's finally learning to think before she acts. What about you? Any plans for the future? I looked out my office window at the city skyline, at the bustling streets filled with people pursuing their own versions of success and happiness. I'm thinking about expanding the business, I said. Maybe opening a second office in Hartford. There's opportunity there for someone who knows how to read people, how to spot the truth behind the carefully constructed facades. Sounds like you've got it all figured out. Not all of it, I admitted, but enough to know that the next chapter's going to be a hell of a lot better than the last one. That evening, I sat in my empty house with a glass of whiskey and a sense of completion I hadn't felt in years. The revenge was over, the divorce was final, and the future was mine to shape however I chose. I raised my glass to the empty room and spoke the words that had been building in my chest for months. To new beginnings, and to the satisfaction of a job well done. Outside, the October wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the last leaves of a season that had changed everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something meaningful from the ashes of what had been destroyed. But tonight, I was content to sit in the silence and savor the taste of victory. It was sweeter than I'd imagined.